Wrong. Good afternoon. It's 1:30 p.m. on Monday, November the 1st, 2021. And I'm calling to order and acknowledging that the press and public have been duly notified of our real property meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. At this point here, I'd like to acknowledge that all of our committee members are here. Councilman Boyd, Councilman Popson, and Councilman Streetman. And we'll go on to item 2, which is approval of previous meetings minutes. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, citizens' comments. Any citizens' comments today? No citizens' comments. Item number 4, marina tenant comments. No marina tenant comments today. So we'll move on to old business, and our first item, item A, under old business, is update on Marina Dock Rehabilitation Project. So Desiree, I will turn that over to you.
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I've included an update re-emphasizing what I prepared and offered the Ways and Means Committee a couple of weeks ago in terms of the updated schedule for the dock rehabilitation project. The contractor and subcontractors continue to work on the utilities installation for charter docks. Over this weekend, the phase dock, which is what we were calling phase A, dock area C, had some issues with the electric, and the main breaker continued to be tripping. And from a notice that I received today from the contractor, it seems like the issue has been identified and corrected. So we'll keep an eye on that. That area has been having some issues with the power for the past couple of weeks. So hopefully that's been addressed successfully. In terms of the schedule for charter docks and fuel dock, that continues as it's included here. We are expecting a revised detailed schedule from the contractor for the remaining phase for fuel dock and the fuel hut. We have been discussing that the construction of the fuel hut would be able to begin after mid-December, December 15th. And the schedule might be impacted just by the holiday schedule. So that's something that we understand. And I just want to have it spelled out, detailed, spelled out by the contractor so that we can understand what days they're not going to be working. I suspect it's going to be the Christmas and the 25th and probably the 24th and New Year's. So once I have that, I'll certainly share it with the committee.
Is the construction of that fuel hut being done at Salmons or in Canada? I was unclear.
So the platform is Structure Marine, and that's what's expected in mid-November.
Right.
The fuel hut is a different subcontractor, and they'll be building it on site
Okay.
once the docks and the platforms are installed.
So now we're looking at probably going to be first of the year before everything gets completed down there, I would think.
That is correct. We're looking at sometime in January.
Okay. Mr. Jenny. Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, just when we the last time we had a kind of change order, it was for construction administration with ATM, and I think it was set to complete at before Thanksgiving.
Mhm.
How are we looking on? Are we seeing other change orders? Anticipating how do we stand with regard to those things?
The only change order that would be anticipating would be one that changes the schedule from November 19th to the new one, which is what I'm waiting for from Salmons. Once I have that schedule, I'll have a discussion with ATM about their construction oversight, to the completion of the project.
Okay. Kevin, anything?
Good.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on then to item B, update on the Marina Restaurant renovation by Marker 116 LLC.
So in your packets, I included a couple pictures that Council Member Popson shared with us. He was at the building last week. The restaurant construction continues pretty much at full force at this point. one thing to note, and I guess what we need to discuss with the committee is the note we received from the tenants regarding the elevator. That was an issue that we've been discussing for the past month, almost 2 months now. And I shared with you all in the packets, the communication we received. And that's an action item on the agenda. Other than that, I don't know if there's anything, Douglas, we had our bi-weekly construction meeting with Insight Group and the contractor. Just keeping us updated in the construction and the ongoing construction. Nothing particularly interesting to mention other than that, they're moving forward. They started the siding inside of the building. And I believe the HVAC has been either started or very near completion. Anything else that's worth mentioning?
I would just add that since your last council meeting, Tuesday, I did meet with Dave Lorenz down on site about specifically, so I think they had kind of exhausted the old location. We then talked about this chair lift going up the back stairwell, which was problematic. I think I had it in my mind, and we kind of had talked about the idea of a lift on the back deck. And I met there on site with Dave Lorenz, and he indicated that while it may be feasibly possible, that it was highly undesirable from a first an aesthetic standpoint of having those kind of views obstructed from that porch, and secondly, from an operational standpoint, the shaft would have to be kind of in the same general location as the end of the bar that they have, kind of custom fitted to that back deck. So we talked, we now have talked kind of about endless options. It does not seem as though any of them either work from a practical standpoint or a desirability standpoint. And I guess the staff, Desiree and I, have been getting more and more anxious that as they are continuing and, they're progressing obviously at a great rate now with an Insight in their sites. From our standpoint, there's still this glitch of you all approve something that is not as it's being constructed. So I think we need to kind of bring that issue to the forefront and get action on how you all perceive or how you want to move forward with that inconsistency between what's being built and what you've approved.
Any comments, the committee at this point?
You guys have been much closer to this, the staff has, than we have, and certainly the oversight, or the Insight Group, which is providing our oversight. Like, wait a minute, what am I thinking? And I think I'm looking to both you and the Insight Group as our subject matter experts to guide us in this committee to say, this has been an exhaustive process, and we feel confident in, that this is kind of the only course of action, or there are still avenues that we can pursue. And what I'm hearing, I just want to make sure that I'm hearing correctly. I think I'm hearing you say, we've tried every which way to Sunday to make an elevator work. And obviously with unlimited funds, you can make anything work if you want to spend gajillions of dollars. But within what a reasonable person would say that is a reasonable amount to spend, there's no option that works. That's essentially what I'm hearing. And I just wanted to see if that's correct, because we're going to make a recommendation, presumably to full council, that we either amend the approved design to omit the elevator, or we're going to go back to the families group and say, you've got to find a way. And if that means you've got to spend more, whatever it takes, then that's what it's going to be. And we don't know what the outcome of that demand would be. But I think those are basically the only two options. So I guess, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but are those essentially the two options that we have before us? And am I correct in my understanding of what I'm getting from staff and presumably therefore from the Insight Group, that really we've exhausted all the options. There's not anything that's reasonably feasible within the current scope and design.
You mind if I take it? So I would say that what you've said is correct, with the only kind of caveat that I could put on that is we have not really analyzed it from a financial standpoint. So, the idea that, but I think you're correct. If we could throw aside the operation and the functional aspect of the back porch and kind of views were of no consequence, or the flow of that interior, that space was of no issue, and money was no issue. I don't know what kind of dollars we're talking about. I can't think that it's cheap, but certainly the group has never indicated that that was the problem. It was always an operational hurdle. So I think from, and a lot of what I am taking their word for what is operationally acceptable and feasible and reasonable. And if I were to kind of be answering based on what I've heard from them, I think that's accurate to say that every reasonable option from the perspective of the tenant has been exhausted. Don't know what they cost, but I guess just to add on to that, now I think any option of having anything in place when it comes time to open is definitely just completely out of the way.
I also wanted to add that as part of our due diligence, we had Coast Architects, who was the architecture group that we worked with on the public safety building rehabilitation project with. They reviewed the plans and the design and the issues that were raised by the tenants regarding the original location for the elevator. And they confirmed that it was challenging and it was pushing into the bathrooms, which are required to be ADA. However, they just, as one of the options that we were evaluating and the tenants were evaluating, the creation of that shaft on the outside was, from a structural perspective, feasible. What the issue is that's been raised by the tenants is how that complicates their operations. And I guess the view that would be blocked in some respect from the parking lot and then the Intercoastal waterway on that end. So from a structural perspective, I think that would be feasible. But I guess we're not only looking at structural, but also any challenges that it would bring to the operation, which again, like Douglas said, we're taking the marina tenants' word for it. I don't know how we would verify that. We don't operate restaurants. So that's where we are.
Kevin, anything?
I've walked it numerous times and the question kept coming up. And I'm not a commercial builder, but I just don't see where you could fit one in. I've asked the question, exterior, interior, the chairlift, all that has been exhausted by Douglas and Insight and the staff. I don't know if there's an option, really.
Well, a couple of things here. I think it was mentioned earlier, with enough money, anything could be an option, basically, but one thing we know for sure, we cannot get anything done in regards to an elevator prior to this restaurant opening. It's that far along. It's coming together, and we certainly don't want to do anything to prevent the restaurant opening as soon as it can as well. But it is disappointing. It would be nice with us and the stance that we have on ADA compliance and going over and above what's expected of ADA to have a city-owned building that would accommodate all of that. Even though, and correct me if I'm wrong, the building as it stands right now is fully ADA compliant. Is that correct?
Well,
Douglas?
They operate under an exemption, basically. So that top floor is not accessible, I
Right.
think that is what's implied when you say ADA compliant. So I think I would say they do not have to be ADA compliant
On the top floor, but the rest of the restaurant, that
is-
first
the
floor,
ground floor is fully compliant,
right?
but you cannot get to the top.
Yeah, and what about the deck that's over the bar that has stair steps only?
Could not get. So really, it is the lower ground level
Uh-huh.
and then the first dining floor, but that intermediate floor above the outside
Right.
bar and then the top floor would not be accessible.
Mhm. Okay. I mean, going forward, I mean, a couple options. I mean, immediately what we're going to have to do, I guess, when we have a council meeting, we're going to have to put this before a full council and see what they think. I mean, do we do, as John had mentioned, do we, allow them to, do we approve a change with the restaurant and the plans to say, no, you don't have to have an elevator at any point, and just move forward that way? Or do we look at, standing our ground on what was promised and saying, this was a promise made that we would have an elevator, so we want to find ways to get it done, even if it's after the restaurant opens, find a way to get this taken care of. And I guess there's always another option too, as to what the city would want to do in terms of that. If we did go back and retrofit somehow an elevator of some type, what role would the city play in that financially? Would we want to be a part of that financially and subsidize that? So it's kind of a complicated thing, but I think the first issue we've got to face is with real council and see what the rest of the council thinks about this.
Yes, and the only thing I would say is that the issue with the elevator, as it seems, it's operationally, not necessarily from a financial perspective. So
Right.
even if money was no object, I don't know if, another location hasn't been identified as a feasible place to even retrofit an elevator. So again, I haven't heard the financial component being anything that would be hindering the installation of an elevator. And that's a question we've asked point blank to the tenants. Is this a cost issue? And the answer hasn't been that it is. It's just, at least for the final option that was evaluated, was not wanting to block the view, which would happen if you install a sort of a shaft on that back area that faces the parking lot. Is that correct? Would you?
Okay. So next steps.
Do we need a recommendation from this committee to full council?
I think we should.
Would that be in the form of a motion? Is that what we're doing here? Okay. John, would you like to make the motion?
Yeah. I will make a motion that we grant the request of Marker 116 to approve the modified plans that omit an elevator due to the structural and operational challenges met with all the options they've exhausted.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
No, I mean, I'll just reiterate, and this will certainly come before full council, but I think it's important that we outline every step that's been exhausted for council and for public's record to know that this wasn't done willy-nilly, just like flippantly. Hey, you know what? They gave it a good college try and didn't work. It was much more than the old college try. So, and to your points about taking the tenant's word for restaurant operations, we were very explicit during the RFP process that we didn't want to be in the business of designing and building a restaurant. And we know that the asset that the city wants there is a restaurant. That was very clear from the public, from the residents, the community. They want a restaurant there. And so we said, we've got a great opportunity here to have some experts in the restaurant industry design and build a successful establishment. And so we explicitly put them in that position for that reason. And so if they're telling us, this is what we need to build to have a successful, thriving restaurant there, which is what our community wants, I think to your points, we have to take their word for it.
I want to go on record also and say that during this entire process and all this discussion we've had in regards to the elevator and whether there could be placement and, and it being included in the initial plans, I truly think and firmly believe that the Marker 116 group wanted to find a way to have an elevator there anyway, because that was to their advantage. I mean, when they were talking about it, having a commercial grade elevator there, that was going to help them get provisions to that upper level kitchen, during the morning, restock that, have that ready to go, and then have the elevator available for diners, later in the day and in the evening. So, I mean, it would have been to their benefit to have an elevator had they not run into the complication with the walls, with the pilings, and it does look like, certainly from the inside and where it was originally planned, that just had to come off the table. Just no way to really realistically do that, and particularly now that the restaurant's so far along. And I think we're all looking forward to seeing that restaurant open and it being extremely successful going forward. So, but I did want to go on record on that to say that I truly think the Marker 116 group looked for every avenue they could to include that elevator that was initially promised. So with that, I guess we'll vote on the motion in the second. So all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No one opposed? So we'll move on. That will go to council. All right. Item D, consideration of noise control agreement with Marker 116 LLC. Desiree?
So not much of an update on this. We have shared with the Marina tenants the red lines that you all reviewed and approved last meeting or at the meeting before that. I still have not heard back from them on any, good or bad on those red lines. They do understand that in order for them to use amplified music or amplified equipment at the restaurant, they need to execute that agreement with the city. I think that with everything going on, knowing that they are not going to open until January, there seems to be other things that are taking precedent and priority for them and their attorney. So the goal would be for me to receive any feedback from them before the next council meeting, and hopefully council can take action with an agreement that they have no questions on or any suggested language on. The agreement, the red line is not included in your packet today. It was last month. Again, there's no action to be taken. The committee has already voted on those suggested language for the agreement. So I just wanted to put it in, we kept it under old business just out of, because the item hasn't yet been completed. But other than that, unless there's any particular questions, that's all we have on that item.
So our challenge is for the Marker 116 group to get back to us prior to the November 17th council
Correct.
meeting.
Correct, and we've communicated that to them.
Okay.
Just a note, I think it's implicit in what Administrator Fregoso said, but this committee has already approved one version, and barring substantial changes from the Marker 116 group, I don't think we need to review it again. It's a fairly straightforward agreement.
Okay. All right, we'll move on. Update on the proposed public dock and green space at the marina. Desiree?
Yes, so just an update on that. We have received an agreement and a proposal from Davis and Floyd for the development of bid specifications for the green space area along the parking and along the bulkhead. That proposal was about $8,000, $9,000. We have not yet executed that because the case has not yet been fully adjudicated by the court. As we all know, the eviction case was brought before circuit court last week to a hearing with Judge Young, the court has not yet made a determination about some of the hearings for appeal that were introduced at circuit court. So once we do hear, which we're hopeful and confident that it'll result in a favorable decision for the city, at that time, the city will be able to move forward with those plans. As well, to that, Salmon's Dredging, we met on site with the contractor that's working on the Marina Dock Rehabilitation project to discuss a scope of work for just cleaning up the public dock, that dock, removing the some of the wind storage areas and the counter space, and retrofitting it to facilitate better public use. That's been provided. So they're also on standby while they're on site. They'll be able to perform that work. We are also working on the next steps for the revisions to the exhibits for both the restaurant and the marina to demonstrate the changes that would be necessary that we've talked about, that require everybody's cooperation to make the vision of a public area that not only occupies the area that would be under the city's control, but also other areas that are under other lease control, so that we can have that sort of loop around along the perimeter of the property. And that's something that Douglas and I we've been working on, and will continue to work on in coordination with the tenants at the marina, both the restaurant and the marina manager. The city is also waiting on ATM to provide some final quotes for what would be a kayak launching pad that would facilitate stand-up paddleboarding and kayak launching. They have they're working on receiving about 3 quotes for that. That would be a piece of equipment or device that would be attached to the floating dock, along the public dock. The other thing is, I think Mr. Smiley sent a note about the next steps in regards to the ADA compliant gangway and the conceptual drawing or conceptual drawings that were approved by council and are permitted by both the Army Corps and DHEC. Those plans would need to be fully engineered. They would need to be bid out, and they would need to be constructed. And that's something that the city has not yet budgeted for. The city has funds in the budget in our forecast, in our 10-year capital plan, of $450,000 for the other T dock, the intercoastal side dock, because that one was reaching the end of its useful life quicker than what would become the public dock. If the city wanted to move forward with either doing both at the same time in compliance with the permit, we certainly could do that, and that would be part of our budgeting process. In the meantime, the existing dock and the existing space would be retrofitted to allow for public access. But right now, as you all know, there's no ADA compliant gangway in that space. But that again would require us working with ATM on the development of a design, specification, engineered drawings, specifications, and we would have to bid that out. Unfortunately, that's not something that would be done while Salmon's is still on site for an additional several months. But it is something that the city could pursue moving forward. But the condition of the dock it's in good condition, which is the reason why it was phase 3 when we were looking at the construction of the permit drawings that council approved a couple of years ago.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead, Kevin.
So for the ADA compliant gangway and the launch, wouldn't we have to adjust the permit and get OCRM or DHEC or the Corps or all the above approval?
So the current permit already includes jet docks. And what ATM's been working on with the Army Corps is a launch, a kayak launch like you see in the picture would be very similar to a jet dock. So that's already been permitted. It may be that we need to be clear in the permit by the agencies that it would be used for public kayak and public launching. But it is their opinion from ATM that it wouldn't require a revision to the permit. The permit was granted when the commercial, when there was a commercial operation. So it would also have to be revised to just note that it would be for public use. But because it's going from a highly commercial use of motorized vessels to a public use of non-motorized vessels, the process should be very simple.
Okay, thank you.
But I'd like to also qualify all this too, to, just to let the public know that we still don't have possession of that, of that dock at this point too. It's still
Correct.
under litigation. So that's, I mean, everything we've done here so far has been trying to look ahead, and it's conceptual. But we think that we're gonna have a really nice public space down there, and something that everybody will be proud of. And I'm sure we can move forward with ADA compliance and doing those sorts of things in that space there. That's going to make it available for everybody. Maybe not initially. It won't be as fully developed because we would have to go out for bids and quotes and that sort of thing. But certainly just to get that space back and start moving forward with it being truly a public dock for people to visit would be really good. Now, Desiree, there's one point on here I don't think you addressed it, but staff coordinating meeting with Marina stakeholders. Do we know how that would look?
So that was meant to be for the marina tenants with both
Okay.
the restaurant and the marina manager. Again, we would require some shifting of areas
Right.
along leases to make
Mhm.
sure that we have the ability to extend that walkway all the, from the end of 41st to the restaurant and even in other areas of the marina. So that was not the intent, but I guess I was referring to the marina tenants.
Mhm.
Stakeholders are able to submit comment through the projects updates page on our website.
Okay.
That form for public input is still out there and has been for a while. People have the opportunity to view the concept and what's been done so far and provide comment that way. So I think that was one way that I know the committee was very adamant about
Mhm.
giving the public an opportunity to provide input. And I would suggest that folks utilize that for the time being.
Okay. So we'd want to reinforce that, anyone watching and listening out there, if you want to provide some input on the public dock and green space, please use that form and give us the feedback. It will be taken into account, looked at, evaluated, and part of the record as we move forward on this public dock and green space. Desiree, another question here. The parking that's shown in the conceptual plan, is that all designated as golf cart parking, or is that automobile parking and golf cart parking?
That, according to the concept, that would be golf cart parking adjacent to the green space.
Okay, but now that's a lot of golf cart spaces right there too, right? I mean, we're gonna have basically 16 spaces available to us, right? When we get that area back.
So yes, however, there will be some areas, some of those spaces are along the bulkhead, along the water. And the idea would be to utilize some of that space for the green space and the park, where we can install some benches. There is another part of the L shaped of the area that is currently encumbered by the water sports lease and that situation. That is not included here, but would be
Okay.
available to the city.
Right.
But as you can tell, the first section starting at the left towards the end of 41st Avenue, that area all along until about where the dock starts,
Right.
that area is now under the control of the restaurants. Per their agreement, their separate parking agreement with Marina Joint Ventures. Then half of the other area would be part of the city's portion. Another portion is part of shared parking, which is under the control and parking management under the control of Marina Joint Ventures. And then past the T-dock, that area is under the restaurant's control. So we've talked about how it requires coordination and cooperation from everybody involved to make sure that we can install that whole loop
Mhm.
in that area.
Okay. But the spaces we will get back in that other area that was formerly used by Tidal Wave, we could have free resident parking there with automobiles, right? They've got
That
a
would be up
decal.
to the city council, the city
Yeah.
council would have the ability to designate that space however you all want,
So
seem
for
fit.
whoever serves on real property going forward in the future, this is our last meeting. Obviously, today as a group, unless something comes up and we had to have a meeting next month, which I don't foresee. We want to keep this on the agenda in the forefront because I really think that there is a huge clamor and call among our residents of the island here that we provide free resident parking down at the marina, something they haven't had. And certainly those spaces there should be, in my opinion, should be dedicated to that. Any other comments? Okay. All right, update on ADA beach access improvements. Is that right? Anything to update there? You and Douglas?
Why don't you take this one?
So since you all last met, we have had the 42nd Avenue path extended kind of to the farthest that we think is still compliant with OCRM's allowable distances beyond the seaward toe of the primary dune. That's been done. And I think we talked a little bit about the fact that that is now part of an ongoing maintenance program with our city contractor. They're going to be monitoring it, doing it, re-straightening it every month. So hopefully we'll learn from that in terms of how high maintenance these Moby mats are going to be going out towards the ocean. We are underway with design at 34A. We've entered into an agreement with a landscape designer there. So we should be getting plans, I would say plans should be back probably the first quarter of the next year. And then we'd be ready to go out to bid at some point within the next year at 34A, where we're envisioning a parking space adjacent to the road, a concrete sidewalk as far out as we can go, and then a very low boardwalk out beyond the dunes. And then potentially, if we can get Moby mat extended through a permit with OCRM, additional matting there. And so we feel good about that one. That one also has some existing drainage problems that we hope to elevate that path out of the standing water in that area. So we hope to kind of address a few different issues on that one all at one time. We have been internally discussing and actually been kind of had a little bit of a dialogue back and forth with Mr. Smiley about the boardwalk at 21st Avenue. That is one that we have, well, really the public works staff has been really struggling to keep that one from being completely engulfed by the primary dune. So it's, and I guess it's a good problem to have that the dune system there is building up so rapidly that they could really kind of dig it out on a monthly basis and it would be covered back over 30 days later. So they really are kind of chasing their tail on that one. And they are also facing the issue where if they were to, at this point, they're only really uncovering about half of it, because as you keep going down, you're literally going kind of subterranean and you potentially are leading somebody with challenged mobilities down into a hole that they would have to climb out of. So what we are kind of thinking on that one is either constructing a new boardwalk, but we think that one will also have problems in that you get that high above the primary dune that you then have to go back down at a very gradual slope to be ADA compliant. or the other option, which probably is a leading option at this point, is to remove the handrails at the end of that platform
Mhm.
and basically grade the hard pack sand flat to where it naturally wants to go and kind of quit fighting it with shoveling it out. And then go to a program of having Moby mat from the platform out. So kind of making the last quarter of that path be very much like the path at 42nd, hoping that the arrangement with the landscaper is good and they could then ultimately roll that path also into their maintenance going forward. So that's what we're thinking is probably the best option at this point. We are going to talk to OCRM about it, see if they have any heartache with us going that route. So we're working on that one. Also, Robert's been working on 9th Avenue. That one is a different obstacle in that there is kind of a cliff that forever is building and receding where the erosion, an erosion episode will happen. It'll shear off that sand. It'll leave them kind of an incline.
Yeah, we have more scarping down on that end.
We really
anyway,
do.
don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of build. It's very dynamic.
Yeah.
It'll build up very rapidly and then it'll go away very rapidly. So that one's just challenging because it's so dynamic.
Input?
Just a
Kevin?
question.
Okay.
And I hadn't been on the 21st path in a long time, but and I'm looking at this picture. It's kind of like open rails holding the handrail. Is there a way of putting a bulkhead on either side of that solid bulkhead to keep the sand from coming in?
You know, we think that we've talked a little bit about that, but we think we actually had that same situation at the public restrooms where we put sides on the rails, but that caught the sand even more. When we did it at the front beach, it was more of a sand trap with the wall than it was without the handrail at all. So we think we've kind of thought of it, and we think that will probably lead to quicker filling in than even it is now.
John, anything?
No,
Doug, go ahead, Desiree.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask a question here. Could we get an update in regards to our communication that we recently had from OCRM, notably Matt Slagle? Talk about that a little bit, just to bring the public up to date.
Yes, so as you all know, we made a request to OCRM regarding their position on how far from the dune, the seaward toe the dune, the Moby Mountain may be extended. We asked whether the OCRM would be open to approving it sort of as an exemption. They reviewed our requests with their legal department and have responded to us saying that the avenue for the city to make such a request would be through submitting a general permit request for them to consider whether or not to allow us to extend the Moby mat. We reached out back to them when we received that information to let them know that the city did pursue that same process in 2016 without any success. So our question to them has been whether there's anything that has changed since then that would allow the city to go through the general permit process for request, and it would, would it yield a different result from OCRM? And as of today, we have not received a response from the OCRM team.
Okay. I talked to Joe Bustos earlier today. He gave me a call and he mentioned that Matt Slagle had called him back and told him that he had been in communication with the city, number one. He also told Joe that we'd been approved for 3 paths, basically, for the Moby mat extension. Is that correct?
It's multiple. I thought it was more than 3, but it may only be 3.
Right. According to Joe, Matt had mentioned the number 3, and that, we of course could apply for other exemptions as well. So anyway, with that in mind, I mean, given what you just covered and then the call that Joe got from Matt today, We already had this plan, but Desiree and myself are going to meet with Representative Bustos on Wednesday with the intention of drafting some potential legislation regarding MobiMat and its extension, and it would be in the form of a bill that he could pre-file. So we plan on meeting Wednesday to start that process.
Excellent.
All right.
The other thing I wanted to mention as we try to, we're working on enhancing ADA access on the beach is the beach wheelchair program that we put together. As you all know, council last month approved some funds for the purchase of some beach wheelchairs. Those have been ordered. They're expected to arrive in about a week or two to the city. We have met with both the police and the fire department to set up the process by which those will become available to the public. It's certainly something that we will advertise extensively to our community that would be available to them. It's something that's new. We're very excited about it. These beach wheelchairs, are very popular in other similar communities. They are very easy to maneuver and just something that, again, we're just excited to be able to offer and hopefully expand on in years to come.
Okay, great. All right, John.
Yeah, just, I know you said you plan to advertise extensively, but obviously the success of this program and building it out and increasing from 3 to whatever number is, whatever number we need, depends on the word getting out. So I would just challenge you to exhaust every options. We know right now we're giving the CVB a lot of money. This would be something they could promote broadly. Obviously, they're not doing local promotions, but we want our visitors coming here to know that, hey, you should choose Isle of Palms because this is a priority for us.
Great. Okay. All right, let's move on to new business. Discussion of shared parking at Marina. I asked that Desiree include this on the agenda for today as kind of I guess twofold, kind of a discussion point for the committee, as we know that, we'll be rotating into a new real property committee going forward. But to just, kind of keep this on the radar screen, if you will, discussion of shared parking and knowing there's a lot of questions out there by some of our residents as to the availability of parking. And I just wanted this placed here. It's kind of sort of like, we've heard from other council members that said, if you want it discussed and not forgotten, keep it on the agenda. So I will say this, that I agree with that, number one. And as we rotate off of this committee, this would be part of an agenda going forward. So hopefully a new real property committee would take up the subject, because I think we all think it's important for our residents and for our island that we get some negotiation, ongoing negotiation, having that and seeing if we can come up with some real solutions that will allow more of our residents access to free parking at the marina, knowing that, they go down there for half an hour, for an hour, they're able to park there without having to pay to park and be able to enjoy the benefits that the marina would offer them at that point. So, and I think we think we may be making some progress on that. We've had some negotiations going on behind the scene, and we hope that later on this year, early next year, that whoever takes this up can make some real progress of what's already been laid as groundwork. Anything to add to that, Desiree?
No, sir.
Okay. Anything to add, John?
Yeah, thank you for putting this on the agenda. Thanks for everything that you said. I agree with all of that. And just, for the record and for the public's benefit, as a reminder, this marina was bought in 1999 for the sole purpose of providing access for residents to the water. And I think the input we've gotten on the shared parking over the 4 years I've been on council has been fairly ambiguous. And I've had a lot of armchair lawyers tell me how they interpret the clauses, and that I take all of those with a grain of salt, but I think that's what's missing is a definitive position from the city. And I would say, I would like to challenge us to go to our legal team and say, here's what we want as a council, as a staff. We want our residents to enjoy free parking at the marina. It seems like the shared parking is the place to do that. And what do we need to do from a legal perspective and in collaboration with the tenants? I don't want this to be in any way seen as combative whatsoever. I think the more that we're collaborative and working together, and I appreciate the behind the scenes negotiations that I know are happening. But I think starting with that position of here's what we want and expect, how can we make it happen? Having that, and I don't know if that's been stated during negotiations, and perhaps you could clear that up if it has or hasn't. But in either case, that's for me personally, that's what I would want and expect. And I know talking to residents and neighbors, that's what they want and expect, that they can go to the marina and enjoy the benefits of the asset that we've purchased, that our tax dollars fund to maintain and keep, and that we can enjoy it without having to pay.
Kevin, anything?
Totally agree with what John just said. There's got to be a way of working something out to where our residents don't have to go pay to have a meal at the restaurant.
Okay, so this will stay on the agenda and good luck in the future here. All right, item B, discussion of 5-year update to the local comprehensive beach management plan. Desiree?
Yes, so the state Beachfront Management Act requires beach municipalities to develop a local comprehensive beach management plan that includes specific information regarding 10 major items. Those are listed, included in your packet, so I won't restate those. The city's plan was developed and approved by City Council and DHEC in 2017. So in 2022, our 5-year local review, which is done by the municipality, needs to take place. And then in 10 years, in 2027, the city would have to submit that reviewed plan to the state again for approval, which would include some public comment periods and so on. So the full gamut of that process. The city in the development of the parking plan, the city worked with a consultant, Chris Jones, in the development of that plan. I've already reached out to him and asked for a proposal for him to go through the review process with us and provide his guidance in that process. So that's ongoing. We're trying to set up a call for this week to discuss next steps. I also have a meeting with the DHEC OCRM representative that is sort of oversees this process with every beach municipality. And we're meeting in my office later this week to identify what needs to be updated from our plan and what would remain the same. Couple of things that I would anticipate seeing being updated is the results or the current condition of the beach in the area where we had the beach renourishment project that we finished in 2018. So that happened again, obviously after the 2017 adoption of the plan. There might be some changes to our to the CRS regarding flood that would need to be updated as well, and also the parking count. As you all know, that the changes that the city worked on with SCDOT earlier this year yielded additional parking spaces along Palm Boulevard from going to parallel to angled parking. So those counts would need to be updated as well, as also including the additional parking spots at Reach Inlet. So that's just a first blush, couple things that we know would need to be updated, but we'll be working full on that for the next several months so that we can have our local internal review completed and presented to you all for any discussion.
Okay, and that's just this is a 5-year local Isle of Palms review, basically.
Yes, I
Of our
mean, if
plan.
you go through just the law and their own guidance, it says that they're required to be reviewed by the local government every 5 years, and then updated revisions are required to be submitted for state approval every 10 years.
Well,
So
what-
our
Okay.
10 state approval would come in 2027.
Well, this 5-year review, does this get submitted to DHEC and OCRM? Or do we just say, okay, we reviewed it in 5 more years, we submit a plan for approval?
And that's one question that I need to
Oh, okay.
verify, and I'll be asking our Adam when I meet with him this week.
Okay.
I think it's always been a collaborative process. We may be able to present or, send them our updated version, but it's the same one that we would be submitting in 10 years, bar anything happening, that would be very dramatic from now until then. But according to the law, it's reviewed by the local government and then only sent to the state every 10 years.
It's good to hear that you've got the additional parking that's been added because of the angled parking and down your breach, that will be part of that overview as well. So good to hear that.
Mhm.
John or Kevin, anything?
We-
Okay.
we have- we-
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
We have funds in the FY '22 budget for assistance with the review. Because I don't know how much that will be, I'm not requesting any approval. It may be under the threshold where I can approve if it's already been budgeted. But that's just something that we'll see in the next month or two, once these details are cleared up for us. But at this point, I don't anticipate needing a council action on that expenditure.
Okay, thank you. All right, item C, discussion and consideration of eligible projects for Charleston County Greenbelt Programs FY '22 winter funding cycle. So, Desiree?
Yeah, so the winter funding cycle has started, actually starts today. This is the same program that the city requested funds from a couple of years ago for the construction of an ADA compliant boardwalk at 42nd, which after kind of coming full circle on it, the city is not pursuing as it originally intended. We have an opportunity to submit an eligible project. As you can see in the documents in your packet, beach municipalities have a little bit more flexibility in how to use those funds. And they could be used for minor improvements on land that the city currently owns. Based on the allocation of funds that we have available is roughly $240,000. That's taking back again the $139,000 that they had allocated for the 42nd Avenue project. So the total that we have to work with or to submit for request for funding is $240,000. A couple of options, I just brought it up for discussion for this committee to provide any additional ideas of what the city's grant application could be. Again, boardwalks, footbridges, paving of small parking areas are all eligible activities. As we talked about earlier, the city and this committee has recommended that the city pursue the installation or at least the design at this point of an ADA compliant boardwalk at 34A. That would be an eligible activity. This area would be adjacent to an existing beach parking area where the city could also pursue the installation of ADA parking spaces or handicap parking spaces along Palm. That is one alternative for you all to discuss and consider. Again, footbridges, it's something that the city can also do. However, they're low cost and something that the city could do with our current beach preservation funds, but that would be an eligible use. The other thing that we've been looking at, and we still need to look at it a little bit closer and talk to the attorneys about it, but the public dock and green space along the marina. So that's land that the city currently owns. The city, if the city uses, if we are granted funds for that enhancement project, the city is required as part of a requirement of the grant to approve a conservation easement for that area. So that would mean that the city would be protecting, or the county would be protecting that area for public use in perpetuity. It could be undone by a vote of the Greenbelt Board and County Council if the city uses Greenbelt funds to create the green space and enhancing public access to the water. And then, somehow the city wants to do something different. That could be done, but requires, again, county approval. But that would be another project that may be eligible because the city would be enhancing public access to the water. So those are just two thoughts that I had, 34A and the public dock and green space for y'all to consider. The deadline for the city to submit an application is January 28th. It requires a vote of council and some type of resolution that the city is, going to either pay the matching funds for the total of the project, and then it'll be protected in that regard in perpetuity. So again, we're just starting to brainstorm, and if y'all have any ideas or are leaning one way or the other, let us know so we can pursue.
Is this something that we're going to have to take up with this council meeting on the 17th, or is there any kind of vote here required to move forward, or is this something that we just need to be aware of and make sure that we address in January?
Council will need to take an action by resolution before the city submits a grant application, which would be due on January 28th.
So that needs to be done this meeting, November 17th.
Or a new
Don't-
council could act on it in
The
January
first
Yeah.
2020.
Okay.
2022.
Okay. Do we, historically, have we received much in way of Greenbelt funding, and do you get to carry that over? How does that work? Does it fall off if you don't use it right away?
No, so these funds are from the second referendum of the sales tax, the
Yeah.
half a penny.
Yeah.
That was
half cent
approved.
Transportation tax.
Correct. So the city's portion allocation from the first referendum has already been used in the purchase of the Carmen R. Bunch Park.
Right.
So the funds that we have available right now is from FY19 to FY21.
Okay.
Which when the second referendum, second sales tax penny was implemented. So every year there's a portion that we get from that allocation. Last year was 139. Now we're at 240. So every year we get about 100,000, a little bit less than that. And the city can just continue to save it until you have a big project, and you
Right.
could use that money, or you can request funding every year
Okay.
for whatever's allocated to the city's portion.
Okay. That answers my question. John?
Yeah, I think the timing is weird with this being an election year, of course, that you've either got to make a decision from our council, the current council this month, or it's going to be one of the first, frankly, points of action from a new council. And for what it's worth, I think that I am going to finish my comment with making a motion to proceed with the two recommendations that Desiree has made. Those are kind of the two that stood out to me. The 34A is very consistent with the tone that we've set and the bar that we've set for wanting to lead the way with ADA compliance. Obviously, we're also kind of replacing, we're switching out 42nd with 34. So I think it's that 42nd has been going on for so long. If we have to wait a whole nother year, just think about how long that is. So I think it makes sense for us to go ahead and move forward with that. As it relates to the dock, the public green space, that's what this grant was designed for. They make some exceptions for beach communities because we don't have as much green space to work with, but this park that we've conceived is actually in the true spirit of what this funding is for. So if ever there was a project that merited that funding, it would be this one. So I'll go ahead and make that a motion that that city staff takes action to draft the proposals for funding the public dock and green space, as well as the 34A walkover path.
I will second it. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'm really good with the 34th. The idea of the public dock being put in a conservation easement in perpetuity kind of scares me. You know, what happens if it doesn't work out and we want to go back to a commercial tenant being on there? We're kind of held hostage by being under a conservation easement. So that kind of scares me a little bit.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. It's not set in stone though. There is a pathway, there's a remediation pathway to undo that. So I appreciate that. The amount of funds that we would require are relatively low. So I think undoing it would be relatively painless. Relative being the operative word there, but I shared that initial reaction knowing that there is already a prescribed pathway for undoing that. It's not an ironclad perpetuity that I felt pretty comfortable moving forward.
Okay. No further discussion. We'll just call for a vote here. So all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so carried. All right, miscellaneous business. Our next meeting date for whoever's on real property will be in January. Do we want to set a date on that now, Desiree? What would it typically be?
It would be the first Monday of the month, which would not be a time when the new council will be
In place.
sworn in. So we typically leave them open, and once council approves and votes on the makeup of the committees in January.
Okay,
Well, actually, those nominations come in December.
December.
So we'll have an idea so that we can start scheduling. Our goal or hope would be to continue with the same schedule, just for the public's benefit, you know, that have gotten used to when y'all are meeting, even though it could change. Certainly, we're flexible. But that would be we would propose to do the same. For January would look different just because of the schedule of the swearing in. But we'll fill that in the next month and make sure that it's well advertised.
Okay, sounds good. Any comments on that? All right, well, that was really the last order of business, but I would like to say to our fellow committee members here, it's been a real honor and pleasure to serve with you guys on the Real Property Committee this year. Really appreciate it. And John, for you, I know you're coming off council, and we'll have one more time to say goodbye at least, you know, at the council meeting this November, but we wish you well,
Thank you.
you and your family, as you roll off. And again, it's been a real honor and pleasure to work with you, not only on this committee, but on personnel last year. And Kevin, you and I will
Carry
be
on.
somewhere and carry on next year,
I'm
right?
gonna write in John's name.
Yeah.
Council seat.
Sorry for this. Thank you, bud.
Yeah. So with that, I mean, that's it, guys. So do I hear a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.